First, I'd like to thank my co-author, Dr. Marion Tupy. He's with the Cato Institute, and I was very fortunate. Thank heavens for the internet. I just ran across him one day on Twitter, and it's like, wow, this guy sounds really interested. Reached out and was able to have a nice little chat with him, and we found common ground. And the reason that we wrote the book, for me, is it happened about 53 years ago. I was in a classroom in high school, and I was required to read this book by Paul Ehrlich, The Population Bomb. And he lays out this argument that he makes that, kind of the war to feed humanity is over, that we're gonna have this imminent collapse that's going to occur. In fact, he made the claim during the 1970s that there were going to be millions and millions of people that would die of starvation. He made the claim that England would not exist by the year 2000. So it's like, okay, this is challenging, kind of interesting. His book is really an update to the 1798 bestseller, an essay on population by Thomas Malthus. And in this book, Malthus makes this argument. He said that food actually increases at a linear rate, or he called it an arithmetic rate, but he said population grows at a geometric rate or an exponential rate. So this gap that is going to happen is going to basically result in the collapse of civilization. So his argument was we're facing this imminent collapse. So Ehrlich was really this update to this argument that's been around for quite some time. Well, there was this very obscure but brilliant economist, Julian Simon, who read Ehrlich's book and thought, well, that's a pretty interesting argument that he makes here. Could be true. I know it's true for cockroaches and mice and rabbits that population resources have this issue. But I'm an economist, so we think in prices. We think in prices, and quantities are interesting to us, but prices are much more valuable because they contain more information about relative scarcity. So we thought, well, maybe I should go back and look at the prices of things and see what's happened to the prices of things. So he spent the next several years just going in and diligently trying to find any price of any kind of. He focused on non-renewable resources. What had happened to these prices since as far back as he could? And what he discovered kind of surprised him. He found that as population increases, prices actually went down. They didn't go up. So how could population increase but prices go down? So his theory was that, yeah, population is increasing, and it increases at this rate. It's exponential, it's an exponential function. But resources are doing this. They're becoming much more abundant, much faster. In other words, we're creating resources faster than we're creating people. So he predicted that we were going to enjoy this abundance gap, that we had enjoyed this abundance gap since Malthus, but we were going to continue to enjoy this abundance gap. He puts together all of his writings, summarized it, and published an article in Science. Science is one of our leading journals in the US. He writes this article with the title. What was the title? Resources, Population, Environment, and Oversupply of False Bad News. Well, Ehrlich reads the article, and when he reads this article, he goes ballistic. And there began this very personal, it went personal very quickly. So between these two guys, they're going back and forth. Every month you get your Science magazine out and you go look at the letters to the editor, because Ehrlich and Simon are going to be at each other. Well, Simon just couldn't get Ehrlich to look at the facts. He couldn't get him to look at the facts. So finally he throws up his hands and he said, how about we bet? How about we bet? And Ehrlich said, yeah, I'd love to take money from fools. Let's bet. So Simon says, look, you pick any non-renewable resource, any time over more than a year, and I'll bet you that it's going to be more abundant. In other words, the price adjusted for inflation is going to be lower in the future than it is today. So he gave Ehrlich this offer. Ehrlich said, okay, I'll pick 5: copper, chromium, nickel, tin, and tungsten. And they put $1,000 on the table. This is 1980. So $1,000, and he said, I want to hold this bet out for 10 years. So If it costs more than $1,000 to buy this package, this basket of these 5 commodities 10 years out, if it costs more, Simon had to pay Ehrlich the difference. If it costs less, Ehrlich had to pay Simon the difference. Okay, so we set this bet up. So once again, these two guys make this argument that there is a relationship between population and resources. What is that relationship? You guys seeing that? I think I might be standing in your way here a little bit. What's that relationship? Well, you've got resources on this axis and you have population on this axis. What did Ehrlich argue? That as population increases, this abundance would decline, that prices would go up and you'd run out of stuff. Simon said, no, it's going the other way. The direction's the other way. So the bet, $1,000, 5 metals from 1980 to 1990. So early in the morning of October 1990, Simon walks out to his mailbox. There's an envelope with no return address. He opens the envelope and behold, one of the most important checks ever written in economics. He had his wife sign it, which I thought was that's a real choice. $576. This is adjusted for inflation. The real price had fallen by 36%. So how is it that that could happen? That period, the decade of the 1980s, we registered the highest growth of population ever recorded in history. 850 million people added to the planet. We grow population by 19%, but these resources drop by 36%. How could that happen? You know, if something's 36% off, it means you get basically 56% more for the same price, right? So I could go in the store, it's 35% off, I'd get 56% more. So abundance, it increased by 56%. Population, it increased only by 19%. That ratio between those two is almost 3. So every 1% increase in population corresponded to a 3% increase in these non-renewable. They were non-renewable resources, right? How could that happen? Well, we're going along. Oh, by the way, 1973 was also the year that Thanos was introduced in the Marvel Comics. And you recall what Thanos' solution was. He said, well, it's simple. If you've got a problem with scarcity, just get rid of half the population. So 2018, this movie comes out. You may have remembered this. You remember the key line in the movie? He says, the universe is finite, its resources finite. If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It needs correction. Do you remember that? And it's like, Thanos, didn't you get the memo on the bet? Do you remember what the bet was about? But once again, it's like, okay. Well, it got me to thinking, and that's when I started to kind of watch on, it was Twitter at the time, and I see Marian Tupy's talking about this. And we both have this idea. Who would win this bet today? Who would win this bet today? If it was held again, right, in 2018. So we set out to kind of talking about it and thinking about it. Before I tell you what we did, I just want to kind of talk about George Gilder a little bit. He's one of the directors here for the Institute. He offers these 3 principles. Wealth is knowledge, growth is learning, and money is time. Money is time. Let's talk about each one of these for just a second. The first one is wealth is knowledge. What's he mean by wealth is knowledge? I thought wealth was oil or gold or water. Well, it kind of is, but really, what is it? Let me offer a little quiz. Right, I'm a professor, I got to do a quiz. I'm sorry. 2 questions. First question is, how many keys are there in a piano? How many keys in a piano? Come on, you guys. All Jews love music, man. They should all get this answer. How many keys in a piano?
80, 49.
You guys are close. I thought everybody. 88. 88 is the answer for that one. We've got this beautiful shirt. Want to bet? Okay. I'm going to give you this shirt because you got that question right. But I got a second follow-up question. We know there's 88 keys to a piano. How many songs are in a piano? It's kind of a trick question. It's kind of a quick question. Before you answer that, if you ask Thanos how many keys are on a piano, what would he say? He'd say, well, you got 88 keys. You must have 88 songs.
But the sequence is after your decision.
Yeah, so you're right. It's infinite, but it's actually 0. Infinite's the wrong number because where are the songs? Are the songs in the piano? The songs are not on the piano. The songs are in the minds of individual human beings, right? That's where the knowledge is. The keys are the atoms. The music is the knowledge. Would a piano be worth anything? I mean, they're beautiful, but would they be worth anything if you couldn't use them to create music with? No, not really. It's the knowledge that transforms these atoms that are a piano into something that's valuable. It's knowledge that transforms atoms into resources. So here's where Thanos is wrong. Physics is about atoms, but economics is not physics. We like to sometimes, we're envious of the physicists because they have these beautiful little equations that explain everything. It's, man, I wish we had an equation that was that simple. But economics is about knowledge. It's about knowledge. It's not physics, it's knowledge. Okay? Now, here's the point that we want to make. Atoms without knowledge have no economic value. They have no economic value. It's knowledge that really transforms these atoms into resources, right? Knowledge is the key resource. It really is what creates wealth, is knowledge. And this has been discussed by lots of economists. Hayek talked about knowledge. Thomas Sowell talks about knowledge. Sowell makes this interesting observation, or actually I think it was Gilder that said, the difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely due to the growth in knowledge. We have the same atoms here that we had with the Neanderthal man, or Adam. We have the same atoms that Adam had to work with. What's the difference? It's knowledge. It's the growth in knowledge that explains why our world is so much different today than it was 100, 1,000, 10,000 years ago. When Lego actually got a patent on their little Lego blocks, the patent officer just kind of asked him offhand. He said, well, if you had 6 Legos, how many different combinations could you put these Legos together? And he went back to the office, did some computations, submitted the answer. And recently, someone thought, well, maybe I should check that answer. How many ways could you take 6 Legos and put them together? I think there's actually 7 in this picture. I couldn't find one with 6. Any idea? Well, remember you got just 6, and you got to put them together. Over 915 million combinations of just six of these little pieces and the possible combinations. That's an incredible number. It's an incredible number. As you start increasing the number of Legos, what happens to that number of combinations? It does go to infinite, right? So Paul Romer, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in economics, makes this observation because we underestimate the amount of undiscovered knowledge that's out there. You know, knowledge doesn't just add, it multiplies. These possible combinations we barely scratch the surface. So we've got 118 elements in our table here, right? The atomic table. How many different ways can you put those together? How many ways could you put those together? Think about music back again. There's 400 million songs in SoundCloud's inventory today. And the Chemical Abstract Society has 275 million compounds that they've registered so far. We've barely scratched the surface. An interesting economist, Cesar Hidalgo, written this book. Put this on your list if you want to read something really good someday, called Why Information Grows. He makes this really interesting observation. He said you take a sports car. This is a $2 million sports car, the fastest production sports car that's available today. You buy this car and you drive off the lot and you're so pleased and you notice that everybody's watching you and you're watching them, and then all of a sudden, boom. I know this is hard to look at, but all of a sudden, boom. What happened to the value?
Limited.
What happened to the atoms? It looks like the atoms are all still there. The atoms are all still there, but the arrangement of the atoms has been disordered. Elon calls this a rapid, unplanned disassembly, right? A RUD. We had a RUD. You see the difference between atoms and knowledge, or the arrangement of the atoms is what gives the atoms the value. And how many arrangements that could we come up with that could potentially and possibly create more value, right? It's how we discover new ways to arrange atoms that give them their value to us economically. So here's how we would clarify Thanos. He's right. There are a finite number of atoms on this planet. Probably a finite number of atoms in the universe, if you want to say that. But resources are infinite. Why is that? Because knowledge is what? Doesn't appear that there's any upper bounds on knowledge. It looks like there's no bounds on it. Therefore, resources can be infinite. How much knowledge? We don't know. We don't know. But that's really why wealth is knowledge. We offer a new definition of economics. You've probably heard the definition. Lionel Robbins talked about economics is a study of scarce resources that have alternative uses. And yeah, that's true. Like gravity's true. But what's really interesting in economics is really how do we transform scarcities into abundances? That's what's much more interesting. So we define economics as a study of how human beings, it's a human science, how human beings create value for one another by discovering knowledge and sharing it in markets. That's how value is created. That's how value is created. All right, his second principle, growth is learning. What does he mean by this? Well, what we've observed across hundreds of different industries is when you double the output, your per unit costs fall between 20 and 30%. How is that possible? Well, it's because you're learning by doing. Every time you make something, you learn something. So this process of making is a knowledge discovery process. The person that probably epitomizes this today is back to our friend Elon. He's got what, 6 or 7 different companies, and what does he do? He puts all these companies on exponential learning curves. Tesla right now, look at that curve. Look what he's trying to do with the production. Not only the production of the units, but the key insight is the data. He's collecting 100,000 miles of data every minute from these cars. What's he going to be able to do with that data? The more you make, the more you learn. The more you learn, the lower your price, the lower your cost, the lower your cost, the lower the price. The lower the price, the more you can sell. The more you can sell, the more you can make. It's this virtuous spiral of knowledge discovery and sharing. Okay? Look at this guy. You know, when he landed that thing, I thought, that's CGI, that's not real. And it's like, no, wait a second, that is real. He landed this thing. He says it's science fiction without the fiction. Well, you look at the same thing. He's got these exponential learning curves that he puts his companies on. If you look at his rockets and you zoom in on them, and you zoom in tight, what do you see? There's the instructions for his rockets. Launch, learn, repeat, right? I'll learn something every time I do this. You know, one blows up and it's like, he didn't seem to be too troubled by this. Wow, what did we learn? What did we learn? Take a look at this. This is the evolution of the rockets that he uses over the last 4 years, or 4-year period. Wow, what happened? There's the one, and 4 years later they go, what happened to all the parts? Well, a bunch of them actually went inside. They figured out how to move those parts inside, and then some of the parts he realized, we don't need that part. He said, the best part is no part. If I can figure out how to not use the part, maybe that's a better deal. Look at what curve, I apologize for this slide, but look at where he starts up there. Kind of on the right, you see the Falcon 7. And it's the price per kilogram to put cargo into orbit. What has he done? Well, over the last 10 years, he's dropped that by 90%, or a 10-fold decrease. So that's like going from $100 down to $10. And his goal is to repeat that. He wants to go from $100 down to $1, a 99% decrease in that price. How is he going to do that? By learning faster than anybody else can learn. Starlink, a kind of a side benefit of this satellite deal is he can do the Starlink stuff. Look at that curve on those satellites. More than half the satellites orbiting today are Elon's stuff. And what's he able to do with that? Well, look what he did with his prices. 2022, he sold 1 million of these little dishes and he was charging $700 US for that. Today you can get one, I just saw one today, for $175. And now he sold 6 million of those. So he drops the price by 75% and he increases his revenue by 50%. He's on this learning curve. He's on this learning curve. 75% is you now get 4 for the price of 1. It's not unlike what Henry Ford did with his cars. 1909, he has this Model T and it's $850. He says, if I can figure out how to get on learning curves here, I can reduce the price. Because I can learn, I can reduce the cost, I can reduce the price, I can sell a lot more, and I get into this virtuous spiral of learning. So the cost to buy one in 1909 adjusted for wages, in 1922, you could buy 8. So you went from 1 to 8 in the course of what, about 13 years? Pretty amazing what he was able to do on that learning curve. So Elon's looking at who was able to figure this out and how did they do it? Make more. Be the fastest learner. Be the fastest learner. Jordan Peterson, do you know Jordan Peterson here in this country? Okay, so we were fortunate, my co-author is a friend of his, so we got to have this interview with him. And it was fantastic. And he made this really interesting observation in the middle of the interview. He says, if you can do the same amount in half the time, you're twice as smart. You've doubled your knowledge, right? And now if I discover something and I have this piece of knowledge and I share it with you, haven't I doubled that? I have twice as many people that now know that thing. Knowledge has this really interesting feature. It's not physical, it's not atoms. It has this interesting feature that allows us to share it, and by sharing, by virtue of sharing it, that's how it grows. That's how it grows. So the new index is really KPH, knowledge per hour. Who drives the fastest? Who can drive the fastest? All right, the third principle is money is time. What does he mean by money is time? We hear, is this okay if I stand here? You guys can see, and then you guys are watching the monitor. Okay, so money is time. We hear this, sometimes you hear time is money. That's actually kind of interesting, but Gilder says, no, money is time. It's actually time. So you take those 3 principles. Wealth is knowledge, growth is learning, and money is time. And you can derive a theorem from those 3 principles. And that theorem would be the growth in knowledge can be measured with time. And that's what our work is about, is how you do this, how you do this. So when we buy something, we pay for it, we buy it with money, but we really pay for it with our time. Isn't that true? Have you ever gone and looked at something and says, well, that's this price, but that's going to cost me like 8 hours of work to buy this thing. So there's a money price. Sorry, I don't have shekels up there, dollars and cents. But there's also a time price that we can express in hours and minutes. And transforming or converting a money price to a time price is really, really straightforward. What did it cost you divided by what's your hourly income? And that will tell you hours and minutes. Well, this thing cost me 2 hours, that thing cost me 4 hours. So the key insight is what's happening to the time price over time. That will really tell us if your life is getting better or not, right? So think about a pizza. Let's do a little exercise here. You guys eat pizza here? Like Americans? Okay, yeah, we all love it. Pizzas actually in America are better than Italy. I've been to Italy and it's like, no, America's got better pizzas than you do. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, it's like, where's your salt? All right, so if the pizza's $20, you're earning $20 an hour. What's the time price of that pizza? Isn't it an hour or 60 minutes? Well, say you go forward, and now the pizza went up to $22, but your hourly income went up to $24. Now what's the time price? Well, that ratio is 0.92 hours or 55 minutes. So the time price has fallen by what? About 8.3%. But another insight is, if you spent the same amount of time today, if you spent an hour working to earn the money to buy a pizza, how many pizzas could you buy? Well, you just translate the numerators and denominators, and you can get the percentage increase. Now you get over 9% more pizza for the same time. So your pizza abundance has increased. You see, the money price has gone up, but the time price has gone down. What's more important to you, the money price or the time price? I think it's the time price. I think the time price contains more information. Therefore, it's more valuable to us. It's the change price and it's the change in time price over time that really is where you want to go to. So, we make the argument that time is a better way to measure than money. And we offer 7 reasons for this. The first one is there's more information in the time price than the money price, because you're comparing it to wages, right? It's a ratio. You got 2 numbers there that you're comparing. The second reason is that it transcends all of this contention that we have about going from nominal dollars to real dollars. It's like, well, what's your basket? And how are you making that adjustment? You can transcend all that and just say, well, what was the price and how much were people earning? What was the time price? And let's compare that. When innovation occurs, it shows up both in shows up in lower prices and people's income. Remember Henry Ford, he was able to raise people's income from like 17 cents an hour to 44 cents an hour. How did he do that? By discovering knowledge, and that knowledge allowed his workers to become much more productive. Okay? So the third reason is you can do time prices on any product at any time, any place, and in any currency. I can go back here in Israel in 1970 and figure out what the time price was for a loaf of bread and compare it to the time price today. I can go to Paris, I can go to anywhere in any currency and calculate the time price and then compare that over time. So it's this very, very elegant, simple way to start calculating the change in our abundance over time. It's a universal measurement.
For you, it's going to take you to make a lecture on economics like 2 days. For me, the same lecture is going to take me for like a week. And the pizza maker doesn't care if it takes you 2 days or a week. Who wants is $20, so.
Okay. But ultimately, that transaction is going to require both a buyer and a seller, right? And the buyer is going to say, what's my opportunity cost, really, to buy this pizza? How much time am I going to have to spend to buy this pizza? What this framework is, it's really a diagnostic tool. It's not an ideology, it's a diagnostic tool that lets us begin to start measuring things in a different way. And we can do that by looking at the prices of 2 things, the price of the good and the price of people's average hourly income. What was average hourly income? US, we have pretty good data. I think Israel has pretty good data too about what people's average hourly income is. We then begin to start drawing conclusions about what's happened over time. Time also is this universal measurement. Of the 7 units of measurement that we use in science, 6 of them go back to time. So why don't we be like the rest of science and use time instead of money? Money's a bad way to measure things. The third element, or the next one, is you can't counterfeit or inflate time, unlike money. It's another nice feature about time is we have perfect equality of time. Each one of us have 24 hours that we woke up with this morning. So we have this perfect equality of time. So if instead of measuring people's inequality in terms of income, maybe we should compare people's inequality in terms of what they get to do with their time every day. And it tells an entirely different picture about life. Let me hit the last one here. And the last one is you cannot buy or sell time. If you could, rich people would never die. You remember this scene? Is Tony Stark's father says, no amount of money ever bought a second of time. You can't buy or sell time. So it also has this really interesting feature that makes it this beautiful way to measure things. Question?
In the Sapiens of Yuval Noah Harari, he has like this ideal vision of the more ancient man. They had a lot of time for play, they were very peaceful. Sometimes the old people had to die, but still they had a really, really nice time. And when you see the hunter-gatherer societies today, they still have a lot of time for leisure, much more than us in the more industrious societies.
Then why don't people do that today? Why don't people go to the Amazon and say,
So
I'm
he,
gonna...
he says that we were trapped. He essentially claims that agriculture enslaved us to like a lot of other needs that don't
Okay.
really fulfill you in any meaningful way, but they make you a slave for work. So,
Yeah, but what was life expectancy?
yeah,
You know,
I
it's
agree with
interesting
you,
because
but he would say
Yeah.
still they were happier.
I just don't believe that. I just think, and I don't think he really knows either. It's like, I don't believe you, and I don't think you believe you, because you really have no empirical evidence to support that. Really. So why did we transition out of that into agriculture if we were really left happiness there on the Serengeti, right?
It's on the topic of money, online time. Let's say I'm a little bit and I have a private jet. I can work while I'm flying. When I land, I'm not tired or exhausted, therefore I walk time. If I have a private drive, I can also work while I'm driving. Therefore, I have more time than the average person.
And if I have a Tesla with full self-driving, I do the same thing. So I actually, later on in the presentation, I have a little set of ideas that I want to share with you, and hopefully I can address your question here.
Professor, I think the notion that money is time is profound. I thought about it a lot before, and I think that what is missing is the word energy. And by saying energy, I mean like, let's give an example. Let's think about that someone that works in a mine for 10 hours and make $10,000. Another person works in an office in the IT industry and make the same amount of money for the same time. So their money equal time is the same. 10 hours, $1,000.
Okay?
But when you think about lowering down the time money, what would be the case if I tell you that if I work in the mine for 6 hours and I make like $1,000, perhaps I would rather work in the high office for 8 hours, which is more time,
Right.
and the same amount of money, but it would be less energy in the process because being a mine is much more difficult.
Yeah,
So it's the time and energy, and not only the time.
Yeah, time and energy is important. We actually do a calculation on calories per hour. You know, what's happening to calories per hour over time as people have moved from agriculture, industry to office or thinking work. It's had this dramatic fall. So, but back to your other point about this is, don't confuse this theory with Marx's labor theory of value. It's not labor, it's time. It's really the amount of knowledge that you can bring to a unit of time that determines your productivity. How much knowledge do you have that you can use in this unit of time that will ultimately determine your productivity in a
And
market?
if using machines, I'm investing less energy in the process. So now if I have more energy to invest in another process, wouldn't be another important measure of the economic products that I can make?
It would.
Not only my time, my energy
Yeah.
that
It would if energy was the thing that we use to measure. In economics, we don't use energy as a measurement. In fact, in economics, what are we trying to do? Use less and less energy to get more and more output. So anyway, we'll come back to that. All right, so back to 2018, we watched this movie, Mary and I watched this movie, and we asked this question: who would win the bet today? Who would win the t-shirt today? So the two criticisms of that bet is it only covered 5 commodities, and it was only for 10 years. So we decided, well, let's extend this, let's expand this. We decided that we'd look at 50 different commodities, and we'd look at it since 1980, so we had a 38-year period that we looked at. So the commodities that we included, we had energy in there, so we had natural gas, crude oil, coal. We had food in there, coffee, tea, corn, barley, wheat, meat. We had materials in there. We had cotton. We had rubber. Fortunately, the World Bank keeps track of all these commodities every month in nominal prices. So we had this really rich source of data that we could go to and get all of these time prices, or excuse me, all these money prices. And then we could transform those all to time prices and then compare the time price over time. So what do you think happened? We do this analysis. It's we do an update every year. So the most we did an update in 2020, so it was a 40-year span. Of those 50 commodities, Do you think any of them became less abundant over this 40-year period?
Yes, maybe
Coffee,
wheat.
wheat became more expensive. Anything else? What we found is not a single one of these became more expensive. In fact, the average, we were shocked by it. We expected, with 50 items, we're going to have 10 of them that are going to be more expensive in terms of the time price. Not a single one of them. In fact, the average time price of these 50 commodities fell by 75%. What's it mean when something's 75% off? It now means you get 4 for the price of 1. You go from 1 to 4. That's a 300% increase in your abundance, right? You get 4 for the price of 1. Population over this period increased by 75%. It's kind of interesting that every 1% increase in population, it looked like the prices went down by 1%. It's like having a party and inviting people to come to your party, and they show up with pizza, not only for them, but for everybody else. You're growing population, but this population is bringing resources to the table, not only for themselves, but for everybody else to enjoy. This is kind of interesting. That key ratio is the rate of percentage change in the abundance. We get 300% more and there's 75% more of us. It looks like that ratio is 4, right? Every 1% increase in population corresponded to a 4% increase in this personal abundance that we're enjoying. If you add to that not only the personal abundance, this 300% personal abundance, but the 75% increase in population, you go from a pizza in 1980 to one in 2020, you have over a 600% increase in this way that we measure abundance. Everybody's slice gets bigger and there's a lot more people. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're kind of thinking this through and going, wow, we're kind of mismeasuring things a little bit. We should be thinking in time and measuring in time prices. Look at the time price over time. Now in the US in the 1900s, we had this company called Sears, and they would mail out this catalog that was like this thick. To everybody in the US got one of these catalogs in their mail a couple of times a year, and they sold everything. They were like the Amazon of the 1900s in the US. They're also this beautiful source for price information. So, I get these catalogs out when I'm bored, and my wife, she's trying to go to sleep, and I'm looking at the Sears catalog from 1932 and going, honey, look at these prices. Can you believe it? Things used to be really, the money price used to be really low, but the time price was really high. Things used to be really expensive. For example, you go back to 1910. Let me show this one example, we'll come back to you. You go back to 1910 and you can find a bicycle in there. There's a basic bicycle in this catalog for $11.95. Is that a good deal? And what's always the correct answer in economics? Depends. And it depends on what?
Time price.
The hourly income. How much were people earning in 1910? Well, an unskilled worker is earning like 11 cents an hour. So they spend over 100 hours to earn the money to buy one of these bikes. Walmart, do you have something like Walmart here?
You can say so.
Okay. Well, Walmart, you can go to walmart.com, you find this bike, and this bike I actually think is a better bike because it's 21 speeds, it's got a shock on, it's got disc brakes, it's $98. People, unskilled workers in the US are earning about $17 an hour, so you get the time price on those two, and what do you find? When you compare the time price of one in 1910, you can get like 18 today for that same time. If I spent 100 hours working today, the money I could earn, I could buy 18 of these bicycles at Walmart. So our bicycle abundance has increased dramatically over this 120-year period in the US, and it's got to be true around the rest of the world as well. Okay? Air conditioning. This place here would not be possible without air conditioning, would it? So in 1952 or so, we have the first we had commercial air conditioners, but in 1952 we have this air conditioner that comes out. And for residences, you can put it in your window, right? And it sells for $350 in 1952. Was that a good deal? Yeah, it depends. What were people earning? Well, when you look at the time price of one in 1952 versus the time, you can go to Walmart today and get one. The money price is actually cheaper. It was like $150. You could get one of these air conditioners at Walmart. It's actually better. It's got a remote control for it. And a warranty that's better. When you do the calculation on the time price, for what it cost you, the time to buy one in 1952, you get 45 today. It's like, wow, man, life is good. Not only do we have this technology, it's really affordable for a lot of people.
But I think the average is one way to check it. But if you look for the bottom 10%
Okay.
people, so I'm not sure you get the same ratio.
Yeah, she's exactly right. What about the bottom 10%? So in our analysis, we actually looked at two wage series. We looked at blue collar workers, but we also looked at unskilled workers. We said, what happens to unskilled workers? And we get the same kind of rate of abundance increase because both those wages are increasing at the same rate. One's here, the other one's here, but the slopes are the same, very similar.
But the average increase mainly because of the top.
No, they're both, if we did this analysis on unskilled workers versus blue collar workers, that multiplier would be very similar. But let me ask you this, do people start and stay as unskilled workers? You probably don't appreciate this yet, but you look at your first job that you get and the job you have 40 years later. In the US, the first job most kids get is at McDonald's. And they start as an entry-level worker making this basic pay, but 40 years later, they're not there. They don't start as entry-level or unskilled and stay there. That's a category, that's not an individual. Individual experiences, you start here, but you're actually moving up, you're upskilling. We call those workers upskilling workers. When you look at upskilling workers, you see this abundance increase even much faster, okay? You don't start at the bottom and stay at the bottom. You don't start at the middle and stay at the middle. You typically start here and you upskill over your career life.
What's your index is different from the customer price index? Like what's giving us, why it's not the same? Why it's not telling us the same things?
Say that again.
The customer price index.
Oh, good, yeah. The CPI. A couple of reasons. I think the CPI, they have this basket of goods. Who decides what the basket of goods include?
But if
Government.
If you look for the same products.
Yeah, if you're looking at the same product, look at the same product over time and see what happens. Now there are some products that actually are increasing faster than the rate of inflation. So CPI is going up at 10%. Some products and services are 12, 15, 20%. What we observe is those products are typically products that you will have a high degree of government influence either on the supply side or the demand side, restricting supply or subsidizing demand. And you don't really have a market. Healthcare in the US, higher education, my game. What was in there? Childcare, books at colleges. Those are all above the inflation rate, but most everything else, even housing, is below the inflation rate. So once again, as long as your income is increasing faster than prices, your time price is going down. Okay? Mark Perry, make a note of a guy named Mark Perry. He has this chart that he publishes every 6 months, and he outlines all of these individual products that the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks, and you'll see where they fall in. Are prices going up? Yeah, they're going up. But what are time prices doing? You've got to compare that to wages. Wages have been above CPI, typically above CPI. They don't catch up. Sometimes you have this shock and CPI prices will go up. Wages take a little while to catch up, but they always go faster than prices because people are learning. They're becoming more productive. Therefore, they're eligible for higher, they can compete for higher and higher wages.
In Israel, it's very common to measure the housing market in terms of time.
Okay? Yeah.
I said in Israel, it's very common to measure the housing market and house prices in a measure of times, like how many months you need to work to have a mortgage, and the graph looks
doesn't look very, yeah. So here's a couple of things. Is the government involved in the housing market? Do they restrict supply, limit supply? They subsidize demand. They tell you where you can build, what you can build. They also do loans. U.S. has got the same situation. If you set that aside for a minute and look at, in the U.S. anyway, if you look at the price per square foot, Because houses in the US were 1,500 square feet in the 70s. Now they're 2,500 square feet. So you're buying a much different house. And it's got air conditioning. It's got a garage. It's got upgraded appliances. It's not the same house. So after you make all those adjustments and adjust for people's hourly income, we make the argument that housing is actually becoming more abundant. Now there are specific markets where the housing price, Tel Aviv's probably, where's the most expensive houses in Israel? Yeah, why is it so expensive over there?
Demand.
Because a lot of people want to live there. Why do they want to live there?
It's the best place in the world.
Yeah, it's the best place because there's a lot of other people that you can make a lot of money over there, right? Yeah, the problem is they're not making more. I mean, they are making more land because you look at what they're doing. They're going up, they're going vertical. Let me finish this up and then we'll do questions. Write those questions down because I really want to answer them for you. A couple more examples. 1961, Black & Decker introduces the portable drill, the battery-powered drill. The Mr. Decker, they asked him about it. He goes, oh yeah, we introduced this drill. We thought it was going to be a great drill, but not a lot of people bought it. And it's like, well, how come? Because it was $100 in 1961. So the time price is like, wow, the guy's got to work like a whole week to be able to get a drill. You can buy a drill in the US for like $30 today. So the time price of a drill, you can get 45 drills for the price of one compared to 1961. So it's like, wow, I got a lot more drills than Grandpa has. Cost me a lot less. Speaking of Grandpa, my grandpa used to always tell me when I was a kid, I could buy a Hershey bar chocolate and I could buy a Coke for $0.10. And he goes, today it's like a lot more expensive. It's like, yeah, Grandpa, but how much were you earning? Well, I was earning like 10 cents an hour. So it took you an hour of work to be able to buy your chocolate and your Coke. It's like, you know what you can get today for that? Yeah, the money price has gone up, but the time price has gone down. Things used to be really expensive. And why have they gotten so abundant? Because the more we make, the more we learn. Knowledge is what is creating this abundance. This growth in knowledge is what's creating this abundance. Okay? All right, let's compare. Interesting when you compare two products, not just the time price of a product, but one product against another product. In 1997, in the US, you could get a 4-year degree at a public university for about $15,000. That's the same year that Sony and Samsung introduced their big screen, flat screen TV. It was also $15,000. So in 2023, the price of public school education got up to about $40,000. So it's gotten more expensive. What happened to the price of these LED TVs? Walmart, you can get one for 150 bucks. So you get 100 for the price of one, but look at the relationship between college and the TV. Instead of 1-to-1, it's now 1 to 268. So if you were to make a prediction into the future about what's going to happen to education, what would you say?
Get more expensive.
Wouldn't you say it looks like people are going to get their education off those LED TVs? They're not going to be going to college anymore because it's 268 times more expensive relative to where it was in 1997. So the point is where you have industries that are subject to competition, subject to this innovation process, you're going to see this increase in quality, increase in variety, and a reduction in price that we all benefit from.
But isn't it a good thing necessarily? Because if you do this and the prices become more cheap, it can accelerate the resourcification, and also it can cause people to consume more things that they don't actually need. Like if I could buy a Hershey for $0.10, now I could buy 12, but it's still good.
So you're talking about me.
Maybe.
You're talking about me, right? Yeah, here's a question I'd love to ask. In 1850, the time price on a pound of sugar, how much do you think the time price on sugar has gone down since 1850? We have good data on 1850 in the US to today. For the time it took you to earn the money to buy 1 pound of sugar, how much sugar do you get in the US today for that same time?
1,000 times more.
Not that. 250 times more. It explains why we're so large. It's because sugar has become abundant. Now we do have those issues. Is it good for people to be consuming? Do we have this pressure on the environment? Do we have externalities where you and I do a deal and we affect a third party in a negative way? Yeah, we still have those issues, but look, I'd rather have those issues than starvation. Right? The trade-off. That's the point. We're going to make trade-offs here, and we're going to try to navigate into the future by being able to discover this knowledge and share it and navigate through the process so we have this abundance that as many people can share as possible. All right. So one issue today, of course, is climate. And one thing that you can do is instead of looking at how bad things have got, look at the opposite and see what's happened there. So with respect to climate, what's interesting is to say, well, how many people died because of natural disasters? And 100 years ago, and how many people died today? Well, if you go back in time, in the early 1900s, you had 475,000 people died on the average each year from these natural disasters. Today it's 12,000. Do we still have problems with natural disasters? And the climate, I'm an economist, I'm not a climate guy. So CO2 and that stuff, it's like, no, that's not part of my world. What is part of my world is what effect does that have on human flourishing? CO2 goes up and down. What does that do to human flourishing? That's my objective function. How do we increase human flourishing? So when we look at that, we make an adjustment for population size, right? 1920 to today, we have to adjust for population. Every climate-related death today, we had 160 climate-related deaths back in the 1920s. So if we made progress on climate, we figure out how to innovate and adapt around climate. Look at where we are. Look at where we are, right? Wow, we figure out how to live in places that are not very hospitable, right? The temperature range is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit where human beings can live. Because why? Because we can innovate around these problems. Now, Jordan Peterson makes this other interesting observation. He got this book called 12 Rules. His fourth rule is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. What does he mean by that? You know, if I look around, I start comparing myself to other people, it's like, well, they're younger, they have more money, they're better looking. You know, I'm pretty depressed. You're always going to find somebody that it's going to make you depressed if you make that comparison. But if you compare yourself over time, what do you see? And by who you were yesterday, what does he mean? He means look back in time and see what happened. What were you like yesterday? What was your parents' life like? Your grandparents' life? If you'd make that comparison, if you look from that perspective, right, it's this perspective that you take. If you look at that perspective, you can be nothing but profoundly grateful. It's like, I'm embarrassed how abundant our world is compared to what my grandparents lived through. And those people suffered and sacrificed so our life could be better. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Let me hang on to your questions, you guys, because we're gonna get to them. One other thing we talk about is life years. That's life expectancy times population. So we can think about this in a chart. Billions of people and life expectancy. In 1800, there were about 1 billion people on the planet. Life expectancy was 28.5 years, back to our friend's book, Sapiens. You want to live to be 28.5? He's your friend. Yeah, okay, so you go to a cemetery. Yeah, you go to a cemetery that's very old in the US and you find a bunch of little tombstones like this and they just say baby on them. And then next to them you see these other tombstones and it's like, wow, there's a lady, she was 22 and this lady was 18 and it's like, wow, what's the connection here? It was very dangerous to be born and to give birth. We've been able to figure out how to do what? Reduce the risk of that dramatically, and we discovered antibiotics and lots of other things that have done what? They've raised life expectancy to over 70. So we have 8 times more people today than 1800, and they're living about 40 years longer, right? So look at that green box compared to the red box. That difference there, right? So we have this life that's just just going. You live longer and we have more people. How is that possible if we live in a world of Malthus and Thanos and Ehrlich? Because their theory is wrong. It's wrong. They made the wrong assumptions about what human beings are and what we're capable of doing. All right, I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about time inequality, right? If you think about income inequality, you can say all kinds of things about income inequality, but remember, once again, what's the deal about time? We all get 24 hours a day. What do you get to do with your 24 hours today? Is it that much different than what Elon gets to do? I would say, what's his life? Is his iPhone 10 times better than yours? Is what he eats 10 times better than what you eat? Are the clothes he wears 10 times better than yours? It's like, not really. Not really. Yeah, he does have a private jet, and that's nice. But I got a Tesla, and that's nice too, okay? Now, if we go back to 1960 and we look at China and India, they would spend about 7 hours a day. Typical Indian or Chinese would spend about 7 hours a day working to just earn the money to buy the food that day. They were subsistence farmers. If they didn't earn the money to that day, they were hungry that night, okay? In the US, that I've got this in minutes. The US, it was about an hour. So look at the gap there. It's about a 7x gap, right? US is 1 hour, there's 7 hours, so it's like the US is 7 times better. Well, what's happened since 1960? Well, these commodities, wheat and corn and rice, have all had this dramatic decrease in the time price. So what's that mean for somebody in India and China? Well, look what China did. Now, instead of 8 hours, they spend what? 90 minutes, 7 hours. They dropped to 90 minutes. In China, the drop is even more dramatic. In the US, we had a drop too. But look at the difference. Look at the difference on the left versus the right. How we've squeezed, how we've compressed the time inequality. So who's better off? There's still a 7x difference between Americans and Indians, but who's better off? The Indians picked up like almost 6.5 hours, and the Americans pick up, 50 minutes. Who's better off? I think the Indians are much better off. I mean, we're better off, but they're much better off because now they have 7 hours. We get another 50 minutes. They get 7 hours more.
Is it median or average?
Average. Yeah.
In India, you have huge gaps, like the biggest billionaire
Right.
in the world, and
We looked at the world price of rice and wheat, the two main commodities, and we looked at we actually had GDP per capita per hour in those two countries. So we had this proxy for what they were earning. And we could draw these conclusions about how much time they had to spend to earn the money to buy this basic food for the day, okay? So once again, the point is look at this compression of inequality. It's like, wow, in terms of that, it looks like we're much more equal than we used to be. The world's getting much better for lots of other places on the planet. Yeah, it's getting better in the US, and this place is getting better, but the rest of the planet's really getting better much faster than we expected, okay? All right, so we have a senator. He's like a member of the Knesset? Is that what you call here? Yeah, he's a senator, and recently he tweeted, there should be no billionaires. And I said, sorry, Bernie. This is Bernie Sanders' his name. I said, sorry, Bernie, but we're all billionaires now. And by that, what I mean is, if someone spends $1 billion to create a product, but we can all use that product at the same time, what does that mean we are? Well, go back to Gutenberg, 1440, he invents the printing press. And before that time, it would take about 1,000 hours to actually make a copy of a book. Now today, if you had to hire somebody at U.S. blue-collar workers, about $38 to $40 an hour, it costs you $40,000 to buy a book, to pay to buy a book. Well, today, there's about 10 million books that are in the public domain. So it would cost you about $400 billion to buy all of these books, right? Well, you can actually buy all those books for about $43. You can buy yourself an iPad, you get a memory stick, boom. You get 400 billion for $43 today. And you can search by word. That's the amazing thing about this. Apple, this guy, Apple spent about $100 billion from the iPhone 1 to this new iPhone. And what's it cost you to carry one of these in your pocket? About, let's do it on a daily basis. It costs you what, about 6 shekels a day? US about $2, that's about 6 shekels a day. You get to carry something that's $100 billion for 6 shekels a day. I love to ask, how much would I have to pay you to never use your iPhone again and the internet? How much would I have to pay you?
Shit ton of money.
A what?
A lot of money.
A lot of money, a whole lot of money. I have yet to find somebody that's willing to do it for less than 5 million. So you just got something that's worth 5 million to you, you're like a 5 millionaire. It costs you a couple of dollars, 6, 10 shekels a day to have that. In terms of time, it costs you what, 10, 20 minutes a day to have that? So we're all iPhone billionaires. You know, I get here in one of these devices. In the US, we spent over $130 billion to develop this airplane flight system, and I get to fly over here for it's like pennies almost, right? You take a flight and it's like, I get to have a $130 billion product that I spent $300 or $400 to go. I'm going to fly up to Paris. Wow. Norwegian Cruise Line just spent $2 billion on their biggest cruise ship. It holds 2,600 people, got 20 floors. I can go take a ride on this thing and they feed me and entertain me for $200 a day. It's like, wow. I'm a cruise ship billionaire, right? Aren't we? Medicines today, in the US it costs about $1 billion to get a new drug approved, but once you've got it approved, what's it cost you to make a copy of that pill? Once you discover the recipe, once you've discovered the knowledge, what does it cost you to make a copy? It could be just a few cents. So which one do you want to buy? The first pill or the second one? I want the second one. I want the second one, right? Music. You have access to all this music, what does that cost you? So how can things be so cheap if they cost so much to make? How can they be so cheap? Because there are so many of us. There are so many of us. And what that allows us to do is to look at projects that cost a lot of money to develop, but then the cost per unit is very low. The marginal cost can be very low, okay? And the reason those projects are feasible is because we have this huge market. If it costs you $1 billion to make a pill and your market is 1 billion people, what does it cost you to get your fixed cost back? You want $1 billion pill for $1? All right, let's all put in $1, we can develop this pill. And then after that, it's free, okay? It can be free. All right, we get rich by how? We really get rich. You look at people that get rich on the planet, and they really, by and large, most people get rich by doing what? By making things affordable for everyone, by moving things from scarcity to abundance. Innovation, here's how we define innovation. It's the discovery and sharing of valuable new knowledge. You want to innovate something? Go have an idea, transform that idea into an invention, and then take it to the market and test it in the market to see if you've in fact created something of value, okay? We can think of the capitals of innovation. What are they? Well, first of all, what is capital? We define capital as anything that you can use to create something of value. Is your pen capital? Is your pen capital?
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, anything I can use to create something of value is capital, okay? Anything that we can use to create something of value is capital. We've got these categories of capital. We have physical capital, the atoms, the world that we can touch around us. We have human capital, right? What do you know how to do, right? You know how to do something. You have something that's of value to other people. You have human capital. Intellectual capital, you come up with this new recipe for a pill or an algorithm. Wow, you've developed intellectual capital. Financial capital. Have you ever noticed that people with money kind of don't have ideas and people with ideas don't have money? Yeah, it's interesting that those two have to come together and figure out how to cooperate with each other to manifest this idea into the world. Financial capital. You can have this great idea, but if you don't have people that are willing to save and invest and risk, you're not going to be able to move out of poverty. So financial capital is a key capital. And then the last one here that I think is probably the most important is cultural capital. What does your culture do in terms of the norms and the expectations that people have in terms of how people are expected to treat one another? Okay? That can be that's like more important than all the rest of them put together. How do people treat each other? Do they trust one another? No trust, no trade, no economy. Okay? All right, so we go from ideas that are formed in people's mind. It's an idea, it's a hope for something that could create some value. That idea can become an invention, but then the invention has to go through this process of testing it. And that's where markets play this key role of determining whether or not your invention is an innovation. Innovation is a profitable invention. My mom used to say, oh, you're a genius. Look at what you invented. It's like, okay, but none of my friends want to pay me for it. Okay, well, those were lots of inventions, but none of them were innovations, right? The world moves forward because of innovations. And we use markets to derive the knowledge about whether you've created something of value or not. I think it's valuable. Does anybody else? Let's go to the market and find out. How do we escape poverty? By continuously innovating our capitals. Thinking about putting those capitals together in new ways that create value that we can share. All right, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit again. To show you a little short video here.
There are not enough people. I can't emphasize this enough. There are not enough people. I think one of the biggest risks to civilization is the low growth rate and the rapidly declining growth rate. It is, and yet so many people, including smart people, think that there are too many people in the world and think that the population is growing out of control. It's completely the opposite. Please look at the numbers. If people don't have more children, civilization is going to crumble. Mark my words.
Is this why you have so many children?
I'm trying to set a good example. Yeah. Gotta practice what I preach.
I wouldn't recommend his method. But he said a key thing. He says, please look at the numbers. What's he talking about? Well, a typical population pyramid looks like this, right? On the bottom, you have lots of young people. On the top, old people. You have a lot fewer of them. You have an even balance between men and women. What's been happening in many places on the planet recently? Yeah, this thing's been inverted. And in some places, not only has it been inverted, but you have this big out of balance. China's got going to have lots of old men, right? And very few young people, right? So if you look at the fertility rate in the world, every woman has to have 2.1 babies in order to just replace population and have it level. So what's happened in the world? Well, from where do we start? 1960? 1950, okay? Peaked about 1962, and then we've had this steady decline. We're just above replacement rate today. So world population will continue to grow. But as we drill down deeper, look at the United States. What happened in the United States? We dipped below there back in the 70s, right? About the time Paul Ehrlich's book came out. Wow, too many people were going to run out of stuff. Okay? Look at South Korea. Way up there and just boom, had this collapse. South Korea in 4 generations, for every 100 South Koreans, you could have 1 South Korean in 4 generations if they stay at that replacement rate. It's like they stopped making South Koreans. Now Africa is well above, but they're still declining. How about Israel? Israel's kind of interesting. Look at Israel in the world.
That's include the Haredi?
That's the total population in Israel. It's like they kind of bottomed out and then something happened and they turned around. What happened? War makes people have more babies? I think it's a commitment to the future. Why do people have children? Because it's a commitment to the future. Trust me, when you have kids, your orientation is going to dramatically change into the future. And I'd love to talk about this one for a long time. Why did this happen, and will it continue to happen? Give me just a few more minutes. We got 14 minutes. Okay, so interesting issue there. world fertility or fertility rate. Israel seems to have, it's beautiful. We come into the airport and it's like, wow, everybody around here has 3 little kids. This is kind of nice. Not like Korea, not like Europe, not like not like South Korea, right? You take a baby to South Korea and they would let you into every restaurant for free probably, okay? All right, so the old economics versus the new economics. First of all, when we think about resources, under the old economics, what were resources? Limited. Well, they were atoms. We made this error, I call them some of the original sins of economics. We made this error of defining atoms as resources. And that's a mistake. Atoms are not resources. What are resources? How do we transform atoms into resources? Knowledge. So moving from thinking in atoms to thinking in knowledge. How do we measure things? Under the old economics, we measured things in money. How should we be measuring things? I think time is a much better way to measure things. And then the third is this perspective. We live in a world of scarcity. Yeah, we do if you assume that atoms are resources. But we understand what? It's really we live in a world of transforming scarcities into abundances. That's how we move forward. So we move from this old thinking of thinking in atoms, using money, that atoms are scarce, to thinking in knowledge, using time, and using this way that we can measure abundance. Okay? This ideology, and I call it an ideology because the empirical evidence does not support this. This ideology of scarcity, of a zero-sum world where I win and you lose. You know, we have wars because I want this, only one of us can have that atom. That ideology has been the deadliest virus in human history. Let me offer this one.
This idea that the planet has too many people on it, there's no sentiment more implicitly genocidal than that statement.
Okay. His opinion's kind of strong on that one.
I think you're right about almost everything. I mean, let's have more babies and raise them on Mars. I don't get that, but okay.
Well, I think we should be cautious about civilizational decline and we have plummeting growth rates most places, yeah.
Right, and also plummeting resources.
No, resources will be fine.
But they're not fine. They're not fine now.
But I'm not suggesting complacency. We do want to move to a sustainable energy economy as quickly as possible, but we're not in any danger of resource collapse.
But lots of people don't have enough food or water. Water, we will run out of water. They're running out of sand.
Earth is 70% water by surface area.
You can't drink that.
But desalination is absurdly cheap.
Why don't we do it then?
We do it. It is done.
You have a lot of free time.
It is done. There is a lot of desalination done.
Okay, but
there's plenty of water. This is not an issue. I'll already there.
All right. So.
Okay. So what about the water deal? Well, you guys can desalinate 6.4 gallons of water for 1 penny. What did you do? You replaced salt with knowledge, right? And transformed something that was very scarce into something that could potentially be very, very abundant. So when we think about Thanos, what's the deal? When I watched the movie, I thought, man, if I had that glove, I think I'd try to double resources. If you had that much power, why would you try to make more resources, not get rid of all the people, right? So this future is really what? Here's what I think this future is. Before I do that, let me ask you a question. How happy are you? Pretty happy. Okay, I'm not done yet. So here I think the equation is your happiness is a function of your quality of life minus your envy. Minus your envy. And what's that mean? No matter how great your life is, if you're envious, you're going to be very unhappy. But if you don't have envy, your life can be what? It can be infinitely happy. If you have no envy, your happiness really can be infinite, right? And I think personally, that's the problem. Anti-Semitism is an envy problem. It's an envy problem, okay? So my young friends, what I'm trying to tell you is be procreative in everything that you think about. Procreating families, Creating a family is the highest form of entrepreneurship. Creating a family is the highest form of entrepreneurship. Creating value as in markets, being able to let people go out and try something and let them fail and let them try again. Innovation requires that people have this freedom to think. Now, Elon's done all this stuff, but I think the greatest thing he did is he bought Twitter. And he restored free speech to the planet with Twitter because the light was going out. And he was able to rekindle this light by giving people this sense that you have something you want to say it. Yeah, it might not make a lot of sense, but you're going to find out if it doesn't make a lot of sense if other people are free to talk about it, right? It's how we move forward as human beings, is we continuously try to discover knowledge that creates value. And we can't do that in an environment that doesn't have the freedom to think. You cannot think unless you can speak. You really can't. Edison said science can flourish only in the atmosphere of free speech, right? This progress that we're hoping for. Now, Martin Seligman, some of you might know him. He's a father of positive psychology. I had the opportunity to go to a seminar with him a couple of months ago in Mexico City. He had somebody call me and says, we want you to come to this seminar, this conference, and it's all psychologists. And I says, you know, I'm not a psychologist. He goes, yeah, but I think you got something here that can help me to help psychologists understand how hope works. Hope, he said, human beings are hardwired to be optimistic and hopeful. You have to learn to be pessimistic. So this framework, this perspective, these facts are the antidote to this irrational pessimism that's really afflicting this planet today. It's an irrational pessimism. It's not based in historical facts. It's not based in how we go forward as a species. Yeah, we're going to have lots of challenges. AI, we're discussing that, lots and lots of challenges. But you know what? Look at how far we've come. Where we've come and what we've been able to do to lift one another out of poverty and continue that process. So the future really is this choice between Elon and Thanos. Are you going to think like Elon, or are you going to think like Thanos? Let me just give you one quote from one of my favorite economists here, Dr. Simon. I want to read this to get it right. The ultimate resource is people, especially skilled, spirited, and hopeful young people endowed with liberty who will exert their wills and imaginations for their own benefits, and so inevitably they will benefit the rest of us as well. Who's he talking about? I think he's talking about Israel. I think he's talking about Israel. The most valuable thing that you can do in your life, in my opinion, is to create more life. So, long live Israel. Israel High, is that how you say that? Israel High. All right, thank you. All right, got some questions.
I think a question that's on a lot of people's minds here, and it will also be discussed in Michael's lecture after lunch, is that in Israel, there's a high fertility rate, but a lot of the families that are having a lot of kids, the kids are not getting proper schooling, and they're not going to proper jobs. And then the question is, what to do. So in Israel, this is more complicated because we don't really know where this is leading to in terms of like economic growth and prosperity, etc.
So the question is, Israel has a high fertility rate with certain subpopulation. And those kids are kind of limited in terms of the exposure that they have.
I would say all groups in Israel have higher fertility rate than average, but there is specifically a group which has the highest fertility rate, and they generally do not. I would say you can compare it a little bit to the Amish in the U.S. It's a little bit similar.
Okay. Are these young kids going to have iPhones? No. Never. Never.
Here's what I would. Certain percent. The percentage is.
You need to give 5 million for any.
Yeah. Here's what I would tell you is, There are people that have children that limit their exposure to the world, the opportunities for education experience, but that's not static. That changes, especially when these young people become aware and have these desires and interests, and they're going to pursue it. They're going to figure out, hey, there's a different world out here. I want to learn about this world. And I might have to wait, but I'm gonna have this opportunity out in the future. So yeah, in the short run, I think that could be a bit of a problem, but look, it's a human being. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, his biologic father, he was adopted, but his biologic father was born in Syria. Now imagine what his life would have been like if he had had to grow up in Damascus instead of San Jose. Imagine what our life would be like if he had that experience. First of all, I think he probably would have been dead by the time he was 17, right? Now, here's a question for you. How many Steve Jobs are around the planet that are in places where they don't have the opportunity to flourish and manifest their potential? Today, I think there's never been a better time to be alive in terms of our ability to access knowledge, to share knowledge, and to have the resources we need to move up this Maslow's hierarchy: food, clothing, housing. It's really time. Now we have more time. The people in India that now have 7 hours extra a day that they didn't have in 1960, they go from being consumers to being potential creators with us. So yeah, think a little bit in the longer run and what happens. Then what happens? What is going to happen to these people? A bright kid is not gonna, he's gonna try to pursue opportunities. So.
I would love to get your opinion on how come gold is an outlier.
Okay. Question is, how come gold is an outlier? We actually have somebody that's going to talk about gold tomorrow, right? The sponsor of this event is a gold guy. So he has a lot more insight than I do. Here's what I'd tell you about gold is not like any other commodity on the planet in terms of its political, the political implications of gold. You don't have people running out and buying wheat when the world looks a little bit shaky, right? So you have these political things that affect the demand for gold. You also have this limited supply. You can't go out and replicate gold very easy. So it's a very unique commodity. We're fortunate that it's not essential for our life. So, but Albert will have more to talk to you about gold.
How do you think that AI is going to, you mentioned it in the sentence, but how do you think it's going to affect your perspective?
Okay, AI. How is AI going to affect your perspective? When I look at those three principles, it's going to affect principle number 2. Growth is learning. If AI can allow you to learn much faster, much cheaper, what's that going to do to the amount of knowledge that we can discover and create and share? Yes. So that potential is going to be, I think, huge. Now, there are downsides, of course. Not all knowledge is created equal.
And I think that there is going to be, when you're looking on time, you're looking on the time of working people. And maybe there will be more competition on the wage, on income, in the face of a lot of productivity and knowledge in working human resources.
Here's what you're going to find. As you become more and more skilled, there's going to be more competition for you. Mm-hmm. Competition kind of cuts both ways. Yeah, I've got to compete with other people, but firms are competing for my skills. Mm-hmm. So my knowledge per hour, if I can learn faster, it's going to make me more productive, which really means that I have more choices with what I can do with my time. Mm-hmm. So being able to learn and develop this productive knowledge is going to be key, and AI has this ability to do that. I remember, the first time I saw Excel, you all use Excel, right? Well, I'm before Excel and after Excel. I have two, that's the demarcation of my world. First time I saw that, I just couldn't believe that my whole world changed when I saw that. It's like, this is an incredible tool. It's going to make me so much more productive in my life. And AI has this ability to do that for people. So the fear that we have that, yeah, we're going to have competition, but you know, we've always had more creation than destruction. We live in a world of creative destruction, but we've always had more creation than destruction. If that was not the case, how come population went to 8 million? And how come life expectancy added 40 years? We have been created in the image of our Creator to be creative, right? And we're not happy unless we're doing that, unless we get to make choices about what we want to do with our time, and unless we get to pursue our creative interests. You give people choices and you let them be creative, and most people are pretty happy.
One last question.
I want to start and say that I completely agree with your conclusion and many of your assumptions, but I completely disagree with the narrative as well. I think that our generation has a lot of trouble with actual wages and prices. We can say that pizza is cheaper, but the actual cost of having sustainable life today, and you say iPhone is a necessity today for us, it's really high. And I think that's the reason that we have problem with population. People here will have trouble to have many kids. And I think that emphasize with this issue in general, and maybe there is some kind of standard reward that both look for, I don't know, necessity for a living wage per hour. But emphasis should be on how can we make equal opportunity for everybody, and how we make this sustainability so people will want to have more children, and not a narrative base that things are cheaper. Because actually, we all know it's really expensive to live today. Really expensive.
So Israel's in a unique situation because you've had what, 7 wars? 7 wars since 48. So it's like, you know, you always have that cloud. So you've never really had this extended period of peace where prosperity could really go. On the other hand, that existential threat has done what to your creativity?
Okay.
You know, people who are really serious about innovation, what do they say about Israel? It's the most innovative place on the planet. The most entrepreneurial place on the planet is Israel. So, yeah, things can be really tough, but if you look behind you, what have you done in this country in 70 years? What have you accomplished? And going forward, you have tools now to be able to really go exponential if you choose to do that. If you choose to treat every human life that comes as something with dignity and worth and infinite potential. That's really the thing, is we don't know when we look at babies, and it's like, who is Steve Jobs here? Who is Elon Musk here? Which one of these people are going to discover something that's going to do what for all of us, right? So, yeah, we can become a little bit discouraged when we look at prices, and yeah, we struggle with these things, and I wish they were cheaper, but you know what? Your comparison, ask your parents and your grandparents, what was it like? Yeah, it was tough, but it was a lot tougher for them. And look, they gave up. They took income that they could have used to consume on themselves, and instead they invested in this place. So our lives could be better. So it's an incredible thing. And then the question is, what are you going to do with your time in your life to make this place better? If you think from that perspective, you see a completely different vision for yourself and for the future. All right. Okay.